This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The United States and China are the world's biggest economies, and each is using their sizable economic weight to trade tariffs like punches. But Trump is threatening another blow, and the rhetoric coming out of Beijing is sounding less measured, a little less tit for tat, and a lot more willing to see this trade war through to the end. Yenna Lee has the latest on China's reaction.
Chinese officials are hitting back at US President Donald Trump's latest threats with some of the strongest language we've seen since his return to the White House. A spokesperson from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs is accusing the US of being unwilling to sit down and talk.
If the US insists on waging the tariffs war and trade war regardless of the interests of both countries and the international community, China will play along to the end.
Until now, Beijing has actually given a measured response. Trump announced a 10% tariff in February, then another 10% in March, and each time China announced targeted retaliatory measures, showing its willingness to negotiate and its capability to react. Now Trump is threatening an additional 50% tariff. The tone has escalated, and Chinese financial markets, both mainland and in Hong Kong, have yet to recover after a catastrophic trading day on Monday. Yesterday, the Hang Seng saw its biggest one-day drop since 1997. Yenna Lee for CBC News, Beijing.
Both European stocks and U.S. futures saw some improvement this morning. European shares rallied over 1.5%. The biggest gain is Britain's FTSE, which shot up 2.5% in midday trading. And after dropping to their lowest levels in over a year yesterday, U.S. futures are pointing to a positive opening for Wall Street today. The S&P, Dow, and NASDAQ futures are all up. Economists say the up and down swings of the indexes are partly due to investors holding out hope that negotiations will stop U.S. tariffs. Donald Trump's trade representative will be in the hot seat today. Jamieson Greer will appear before Senate Finance Committee, where he is expected to defend the president's tariff war. The CBC's Katie Nicholson joins me now from Washington. And Katie, what can you tell us about today's hearing?
Well, you could expect fireworks. Democratic Senator Maria Cantwell is on the committee. She put forward that bill with Republican Senator Chuck Grassley looking to wrestle the power to enact tariffs back to Congress. And Greer also has to worry about Grassley. He's from Iowa, where a lot of his constituents are really concerned about how these tariffs are going to impact the agriculture sector. Independent Senator Bernie Sanders is also on the committee. And of course, he has called the way that these tariffs have been implemented illegal and another step toward authoritarianism. Greer is likely going to push the White House line that these tariffs are going to boost the domestic revenue and manufacturing and eliminate that $1.2 trillion trade deficit. Now, in a copy of his prepared remarks for this morning, Greer calls this a moment of drastic overdue change, and it's a message he's going to have to sell amid the backdrop of markets that have shed trillions since the plan was unveiled.
We're expecting Trump's reciprocal tariffs to kick in at midnight. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is that second wave of tariffs where those really high percentages get applied to dozens of countries. So let's just zoom in on one example. Take a look at your sneakers, pull out the tongue. Were they made in Vietnam? Well, for Americans, that's going to be subject to a 46% charge. So big fear is obviously around how this is going to affect business bottom lines and consumer spending amid growing fears of a U.S. and global recession. So Moody's chief economist Mark Zandi on Power and Politics yesterday said, "We aren't there yet, but we could be by the summer."
Given all the things that are kind of unfolding here, and the president doesn't find an off-ramp, for these tariffs, we'll see some negative job numbers. And when the academics sit down and date this recession, it will be, June or July 2025.
And that is precisely the sort of prediction that is causing cracks in the president's base on Capitol Hill, because many congressional Republicans worried about running in midterm elections in a recession potentially caused by their president.
Thanks, Katie.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Katie Nicholson in Washington. The Kremlin says it supports Donald Trump's plan to have direct talks with Iran about a nuclear deal.
Безусловно, потому что мы неоднократно говорили, что мы...
Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters this morning Russia wants to settle Iran's nuclear file through diplomatic and political means. Yesterday in the Oval Office, Trump said his administration is already in contact with Iran, and they expect to have a meeting on Saturday, part of a bid to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. The White House has not said where these talks are supposed to happen or which official would be involved. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is holding some huge rallies in this election campaign, but his event last night in Alberta was exceptionally large. The party estimates 12,000 people showed up. As Olivia Stefanovich reports, Poilievre was not the only person supporters came out to see.
Canada right now needs change more desperately than it perhaps ever has.
Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper taking the stage in a large warehouse outside of Edmonton to give party leader Pierre Poilievre's campaign a boost.
I am the only person who can say that both of the men running to be Prime Minister once worked for me.
Harper endorsed Poilievre in front of a crowd of thousands who lined up for hours to get into the rally. They cheered as Harper took a few swipes at Liberal leader Mark Carney, who was governor of the Bank of Canada when he was in power.
I say that as the guy who actually did lead Canada through the global financial crisis.
Harper also tried to blunt criticism about Poilievre being a career politician by describing his political experience as the single most important skill set for a prime minister. Poilievre said it was a thrill being on stage with Harper.
He is the greatest mentor I could ever ask for.
It's the first time Harper is out campaigning with a Conservative leader since his government was defeated by the Liberals in 2015, making a rare but significant appearance to build momentum for the Conservatives as they try to win back their lead in the polls. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Nisku, Alberta.
The Liberal and NDP leaders are both out west today. Mark Carney held a rally for supporters in Richmond, BC last night. He is keeping his message focused on the battle against U.S. tariffs.
The Americans understand money, lawyers, and Fox News. So we're fighting them with tariffs. We're fighting them in the courts. And as I said last night, I wasn't joking. We sent Doug Ford down onto Fox News to fight. And he's doing a damn good job.
Jagmeet Singh is also in the Lower Mainland. The NDP leader will join the picket line beside striking workers with the BC General Employees Union. And he's also scheduled to meet with the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs, Grand Chief Stuart Phillip. Green Party leader, co-leader Elizabeth May is in Guelph, Ontario again today. She is expected to unveil her party's healthcare platform. In Nova Scotia, some 2S LGBTQ plus people say they no longer feel safe as they once did. That is because of incidents of vandalism targeting the community. Recently, a sex shop and a bookstore in Halifax were vandalized 3 times in 1 month. The CBC's Andrew Lamb reports.
These incidents have made Kay Skinner feel less safe. The vice chair of Lunenburg County Pride says she sometimes intentionally hides her queerness to avoid hate.
It's really hard knowing that I've done so much work to be an openly queer woman for myself, that I'm now having to go back to a space where I'm pretending that I'm not part of the 2S LGBTQI community in specific community spaces.
In Halifax, the most recent incident of vandalism at the iconic queer-owned store Venus Envy included a handwritten letter left in the doorway. The store said in a statement that the letter referenced the extermination of queer people. Jay Roy is trans and owns a comic shop in the municipality. He says he was heartbroken to hear what happened.
It's not the first time we've seen it, unfortunately, this kind of act in Nova Scotia.
Helen Kennedy is head of the Canadian advocacy organization EGAL. She believes hate has been emboldened by U.S. President Donald Trump's executive orders targeting the 2S LGBTQ plus community.
Now it's basically giving people permission to engage in these types of negative discriminatory activities towards members of the 2S LGBTI community, in particular trans and gender diverse people.
But Kennedy says the hate was already here in Canada regardless of what's happening in the U.S. and that we all need to take responsibility for that. Andrew Lamb, CBC News, Halifax.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.